was looking for answers, right? But I was looking in all the wrong places. I was eating Slim Fast bars for breakfast and thinking that I was gonna lose weight and like get healthy, which is so ironic.
You know, in the States, a lot of our food is just not even food.
This is what many people need to understand, is that the majority of the food on our shelves was not created with health in mind. It was created with profits in mind.
I don't think that we got here overnight, and I think we just ignored the problem until we are at the point where the cost of healthcare could break the entire system.
What's gonna stand the test of time when it comes to nutrition and health? We always need to be coming back to eating real food.
These sinister things that have gone on for decades, and the reason why the majority of people are just walking around probably 60% of their true state of normal, and just believing that this is a consequence of aging.
Just because it's happening to a lot of people and it's becoming normalized does not mean that it's okay. That does not have to be your experience.
So where does this go? In a perfect world, where does your mission, can you have the greatest effect?
That's a great question. If I could just change one thing, that has been the basis of my entire business and my message, is that we need to be
Hey guys, welcome back to the Ultimate Human Podcast, where we go down the road of everything anti-aging, biohacking, longevity, and everything in between. I'm your host, human biologist Gary Brecka, and today's guest, Courtney Swan, you are going to love her. We did podcasts before we actually got on the podcast. We did a podcast while we ate lunch between the podcast. But I'm so excited to bring this woman on because as young and beautiful as she is an OG in this space, because she's been in this space more than 10 years, really fighting for awareness and drawing people's attention to nutrition, our food supply, the corruption in our food supply. She's a major advocate for public policy. She is an advocate of the MAHA movement, as am I. And so you're really going to enjoy this podcast. Stay tuned to the end. I've got a lot of things for you guys, but welcome to the podcast, Courtney Swan.
Thank you so much for having me. And
I'm
thank
so
you for,
excited to have you.
This is so much fun. We were talking earlier on my podcast about how we just felt like little kids. We're just like so excited.
I'm just so excited to be in this industry, and so excited to the caliber of people that we get to associate with, and the sincerity of the commitment of most of the people in our industry, our peer group. It's just, everybody wants to see the tide raise all of our boats.
Yes.
And we're all on this same mission to just better humanity. And I find that there's a lack of arrogance and a sincere fabric of authenticity in this community. And everyone wants to see everyone else thrive. And it's just very unique, I think, to a lot of, different industries out there. So we are both very, very blessed to be a part of this.
Yeah.
And you've had kind of an interesting journey, which I find fascinating. And I really think that your influence is now beginning to be recognized to the point where you're able to have a bigger voice and potentially make a bigger impact. So talk a little bit about your journey to becoming this advocate for food. Realfoodology is her podcast. If you haven't seen it, you've got to check out Realfoodology. I was just on it. So at a minimum, watch my episode. But talk a little bit about the genesis of this. How did it become your purpose, your passion? Like, what ignited it for you?
Yeah, it was a journey for me to get there, for sure. We had talked about this earlier off camera, but I started out working in music, actually. My mom had really planted the seeds for me when I was a kid, because she was buying organic and natural food before it was even a movement or a thing. And when I was a kid, like most kids, you don't realize how good you have it, right? Like I was watching all my friends eating Dunkaroos and getting Burger King every night for dinner, and I was upset. And then I was going home to my amazing organic home cooked meals that my mom would be in the kitchen almost for 2 hours every night making everything from
Which
scratch.
you despised her for at the time.
Oh, I despised her at the time.
You're like, what about Lucky Charms, Mom?
Yeah, I was like, I want the McDonald's. Like, I want a Happy Meal. And now, I mean, obviously, I am so beyond grateful. I went to college. I started eating fast food, and I don't even recognize who that person is anymore. But, I was eating in the dining hall, which is, Cisco and Shamrock Foods catering. And I gained a bunch of weight. I got acne I'd never had before. I was fatigued. And it wasn't until I took a nutrition course, and also my mom had sent me a book on nutrition. It was literally just called You Are What You Eat.
Wow.
And because I was looking for answers, right? But I was looking in all the wrong places. I was eating Slim Fast bars for breakfast and thinking that I was going to lose weight and like get healthy, which is so
Right.
ironic, right? And I found this book. It's called You Are What You Eat. And it really just, it was talk about a light bulb moment for me. It made me really understand, oh, wow, the things that I'm putting in my body, the food that I'm eating is quite literally building my cells. And it's going to either determine whether I have good energy and I'm going to be at a healthy weight and I'm not going to, be inflamed all the time, or it's going to drive all of that.
Right.
And it's so funny looking back to that now, thinking how much of a light bulb moment that was for me. But it really lit a fire under my ass because to be quite frank, I was pretty mad that I had not learned that sooner.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was probably 20 at that point.
And you were in
And
college.
and
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, why aren't we teaching small children this? Why doesn't every human know this? And I was also thinking too, looking at all my, my parents' friends and like older generations, and a lot of them still hadn't figured it out. And I was so flabbergasted, for lack of a better word, because I was like, this is so simple, right?
Right.
It's so simple. The things that we're eating and we're putting in our bodies are either fighting disease or fueling it,
Yes.
And so that really ignited a passion in me. And then I just could not get enough information. I found Michael Pollan back then when he was writing about food.
Mm.
I found Dr. Mark Hyman. I think I read one of his
Oh, I
very
love
first
him.
books. Love him.
Yeah.
And he introduced me to this world of functional and integrative medicine, which is, root cause disease protocol, where you're looking at the root cause and you're looking for the root cause and trying to mitigate symptoms with diet and lifestyle changes. So that really affected me a lot. I was I was actually touring at the time. I finally decided
In the music industry. Yeah.
exactly. So I was with the music industry. I decided to quit that, and I went back and I got my master's of science in nutrition and integrative health.
Wow.
And then actually during that time, I got pulled back onto the road, and I ended up being a nutritionist for 4 years for a pop star.
Really?
Yeah, which was pretty
That's
amazing.
so cool.
And it was very cool because it was, I got to kind of blend both of my favorite worlds, which was nutrition and then being on tour and getting to work for musicians, which was so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I did hit a point where, we kind of talked about this on my podcast, that it was really starting to really like tax my body. Like I just was feeling the effects of not getting enough sleep, and
Mhm.
it is harder to eat healthy. And so I finally in 2019 decided to no longer tour anymore, and I had been building Realfoodology on the side. And at the time, it really was more just of a hobby. I really had no plan. I had no like goals or plans of turning this into anything
Mm.
other than it started with a passion where I felt like this was information that people largely didn't know.
Mhm.
And I was seeing so many people suffer. And like you just said a minute ago, I want to see people thrive.
Yeah.
And so I started Realfoodology as a blog, and I was just kind of Instagramming my touring life. And then in 2019, I was like, you know what, I'm going to pursue this full time. Started my podcast in 2020.
Wow.
And
2020. That's awesome. Yeah.
yeah. And then it just kind of has exploded from there.
That's so great. I think too that, sometimes when we travel, we realize that, you go to Italy and you have a bowl of pasta and a basket of bread, maybe a glass of wine, and you feel amazing.
Yeah.
In fact, some people will travel to European countries and lose weight, even though
Yeah.
they're eating high carbohydrates.
Pizza, pasta.
I remember when the research came out on the blue zones, and I was watching the documentary on the blue zones, and I was reading the book on it, and I read Dr. Walter Longo's book, The Longevity Diet, and I realized, there's no continuity between diets that are helping people live to be hypercentenarians. I mean, it wasn't carnivore, keto, paleo, pescatarian, vegan, vegetarian. It wasn't the hyper dogmatic diets. It was just whole food,
Yes.
like just real food.
Yes.
And, in the States, a lot of our food is just not even food. And I wonder if we could talk about that for a minute, because without sounding like fear mongers,
Hmm.
a part of what I believe our industry and people like yourself are trying to do is just help people get around the system
Hmm.
and just get back to the basics almost, right? I mean, I feel like if most people just got sunlight, touched the surface of the earth, focused on their sleep, hydrated, some minerals, made whole foods, I mean, just those basics would have such a dramatic impact on their life.
Yeah.
And so I know that you're very connected to and an enormous supporter of the Maha movement. We talked a little bit about it on your podcast. I wonder if we might just delve into some of the sinister things that have gone on for decades,
Hmm.
that are really leading to this chronic disease epidemic that we have, and the reason why the majority of people are just walking around probably 60% of their true state of normal, and just believing that this is a consequence of aging.
So that is one of the biggest myths in all of this, in the nutrition, wellness, and medical system that really drives me nuts is that people just think, oh, this is just what happens. You start aging and then you don't feel that well and your energy plummets. And then, you maybe have to go on a couple medications and maybe you get diabetes. Oh, that's just aging. I hear that all the time. It's just, oh, well, it's just part of being human. That does not have to be your experience.
Yeah, and I think it's normalized, not to cut you off, but I think it's
No.
normalized too because at certain ages, your whole peer group is experiencing the same thing.
Yes.
They're like, yeah, well, none of us really sleep well, and we don't remember anything. I can't find my car keys in my belt in my wallet, and
And they're like, oh, it's normal because all my
and I got
friends are
this
doing the same
spare
thing.
tire that I never really had, but all my friends do, and
Yep.
I'm on 3 meds, but all of my buddies are on 3 meds, and my wife's on 3 or 4 meds,
Yes.
and I think that normalization almost makes it feel like no, it's just a part of quote unquote what happens. But
Exactly. But just because it's happening to a lot of people and it's becoming normalized does not mean that it's okay and that it should be
I
happening.
agree. Yeah.
And yeah, and a lot of this is largely driven by the fact that we are, for the most part, not really eating food anymore.
hmm
60% of Americans' diets are coming from ultra processed foods. 60%. That's more than half of our diet.
What does it mean to be ultra processed? I think a lot of people don't understand what that means. I mean, does that mean that we just take a cow and slaughter it and chop it into steaks and package it and send it?
No.
Or
So that would be processing. Yeah. So
yeah.
there's a lot of discrepancy between like processing versus ultra processed because I see some of these like RDs or dissenting voices out there that are saying, "Oh, well, applesauce is processed, bread is processed." So that is absolutely true, but there's a huge difference between eating applesauce that maybe is just made with apple and maybe they add a little bit of sugar and some water versus if you were going to go to McDonald's and get an apple pie.
hmm
So the difference between ultra processed and just something simply processing that we've been doing since the dawn of time is with ultra processed foods, you're adding a ton of additives and preservatives and fillers in there, and that food no longer resembles what that natural state of
Mm.
food once was. I often tell people if your grandparents were to time travel, or maybe like your great grandparents, like someone who's no longer alive, if they were to time travel and you just dropped them into 2025 and you took them to the grocery store and you showed them all these food products that we're eating,
Oh my God.
they probably wouldn't even know where it came from. Like they wouldn't even be able to tell you just by looking at it. Like, oh, I know that is from potatoes. They would be like, what is that?
Right.
That would be something that would be ultra processed foods. Ultra processed foods are made with a bunch of ingredients that you would not normally have in your kitchen. There are a
Yeah.
bunch of ingredients that you find in factories. And my argument and the whole reason that I started Realfoodology, my whole thing was when I came up with that name 14 years ago, is I sat down and I thought, what's going to stand the test of time when it comes to nutrition and health? We always need to be coming back to eating real food.
That's so true.
And that has been the basis of my entire business and my message is that we need to be getting back to eating real food. And right now, more than, or the majority of our calories are coming from these ultra processed foods.
You know what's amazing is I still remember going into my grandmother's basement, Grandma Rose, who I named my daughter after.
Oh,
So my grandmother, Rose Brecka, she in her basement, which was always like a little cool, were all these like canned vegetables everywhere. And she would
yes.
every year, she would can vegetables and she would make like sauerkrauts and kimchis and pickles and all of this stuff. I always thought it was like a little weird. But I really identify with it now. And I remember I
Yeah.
used to press the lid, and if the lid was still tight, she's like, "Yeah, bring it upstairs. If the lid pops, throw it in the trash."
Yes.
And I still remember it. So I'm like, "This is so weird." I'm because I was here last Christmas, and that pickle was right there. So something tells me I shouldn't bring this up and eat it. But it made
That's
so much
funny.
sense. They didn't have preservatives and they didn't have the thickening agents and a lot of these artificial ingredients, and so they preserved them naturally through the fermentation process, which actually made them
Exactly.
more healthy. And like fermented vegetables, one of the healthiest things you can put in your body. I try to eat a lot of kimchi and sauerkraut and
Yeah.
get the soluble and insoluble fibers. But I think we've modernized things,
hmm
and I don't think that we got here overnight.
hmm
I think we got here really slowly. And I think we just ignored the problem until we are at, call it pandemic levels, crisis levels, whatever you want to call it. I mean, we are at
Yes.
the point where I think from a financial perspective, that, the cost of healthcare could break the entire system.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I don't think people understand how detrimental it is, actually.
I don't think so either. I wonder if you might talk about that a little bit. And I want to go into some of the chemicals specifically, like glyphosate. We hear about these things, but we don't really know, how do they get into our food supply? Why are they in our food supply? Is there some kind of sinister profit motive behind it? And if so, what can we do to address it?
Yeah, so I largely believe that most of this stuff started with good intention. The problem is that now that we have the data and the science and we know that these chemicals and certain processing, things that we're doing with our food, we now know that they are harming people. And
Mhm.
now it is to the point where it is becoming sinister, in my opinion. But I don't think it started out that way. Largely, a lot of what we're dealing with now, which is an industrialization of our food system, was started because of the war.
Mhm.
After the war, there was famine. People, or our president was genuinely concerned about getting enough food to people, having it be cheap, accessible, fast. So that's when we started paying subsidies to farmers, because they thought, okay, what crops can we grow just rows and rows and rows of, grow them really fast, and then commoditize them,
Commoditize.
commoditize them. Why was that so hard for me to get
You
out?
actually said a word on the podcast last time. That was the first time I'd ever heard it. I need to go back.
Infantilize, maybe? Was that what-
Infantilize.
Yeah.
That was the word. I almost fact checked you on that, because I was like, I've never heard of it, but the context, I got it.
Yeah.
So it is
I
really
love-
a word.
It is.
Well, I say
yeah.
regardless, and lots of other things that are not words, but that's really good. It's rare that I hear a word and I'm like, wow, that's a new one.
It's fun. I've been
Infantilize.
trying to broaden my
You're gonna
words.
hear it start popping into my podcasts,
love
right?
it.
I hope I use it well.
I would be like, oh, Gary got that from
not
me.
to
I love it.
infantilize you,
But- But
if you want protein to build lean muscle, but without the caloric impact or need to cut, you need Perfect Amino. It's pure essential amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, in a precise form and ratio that allows for near 100% utilization in building lean muscle and no caloric impact. So we build protein 6 times as much as whey, but without the excess body fat we normally get during bulking. This is the new era of protein supplementation, and it's real. If you want to build lean muscle without having to cut, you need Perfect Amino. When it comes to snacking, Masa is flipping the script on what real food should look like. Masa chips are crafted with grass-fed beef tallow, one of the healthiest fats on the planet. These chips are packed with essential vitamins like vitamin A, D, E, and vitamin K2, all of which play a role in keeping your skin vibrant, your immune system strong, and your bones solid. But here's the real magic about Masa. Masa's corn goes through an ancient process called nixtamalization, which makes it way easier to digest, and it amps up its nutrient profile. Plus, these chips are low in PUFAs, so you won't find any of the inflammatory seed oils that you find in most snacks, and instead, Masa uses pure Redmond sea salt, giving you a natural hit of minerals that keep your cells hydrated and your energy steady. So don't just snack. Reach for Masa. It's real food, real health, without any of the junk. Grab a bag, and I promise you'll feel the difference. Now, let's get back to the Ultimate Human podcast. So, historically, you think that, obviously after the war, we needed to promulgate crops, and we needed to have them
Yes.
less expensive and more readily available.
And there was also this notion, which we're still seeing today, is that they wanted to feed the world. So this is when we started introducing things like glyphosate, for example, which is one that I really am hyper-focused on right now. I'm incredibly concerned about glyphosate. Over 90% of Americans were finding glyphosate in their urine, and it's coming up in placenta, it's coming up in breast milk.
I had it in my urine. I did the
Me too.
Vibrant Wellness test.
Yeah. Even those of us that are eating organic and we're doing really hard and we're doing
Yep.
saunas and we're detoxing, we are all finding it in our blood, and it is so incredibly concerning. So glyphosate is an herbicide. It's also known as Roundup, which was created by Monsanto. Now, in 2018, Bayer, which is a pharmaceutical company, bought Monsanto, and now they are also a agrochemical company, and they own a majority of our food system now because they have patented genetically modified seeds, which are corn, wheat, we just started genetically modifying wheat recently, but corn and soy are the majority of those. Now, during the war, what we did is we started paying subsidies to farmers. What are subsidies? These come from taxpayer dollars, and it's money that we give to farmers in order to incentivize them to grow specific crops.
Wow.
Now, some of the crops that we do with that are corn and soy. Now, it's why I would encourage everybody listening, if you have any ultra-processed foods in your cabinet, I would go and I would read the label, and I would argue that almost every single one of them that you pick up, it's going to say may contain corn, wheat, and soy.
Really?
They're in everything. because we are paying farmers to grow them. So we have them in surplus, and it's cheaper, it's more accessible, it's more affordable. Again, we have it in excess. So we're using it in everything. And so not only is it being pushed into our ultra processed foods in the forms of, vegetable oils, all of our processed grains, corn syrup is a really big one.
Wow. Yeah. High fructose corn syrup.
Yep. We're also using that to feed our livestock. So we're also getting it on the other end in our meat, our dairy, and our eggs. And glyphosate is incredibly concerning. It has very concerning backstory. So this is actually what I did my Senate speech on. I was so grateful to be a part of this roundtable, this nutrition roundtable. It was hosted by Senator Ron Johnson back in September, and it was with Vani Hari, Michaela Peterson, Jordan Peterson, RFK Jr., Callie and Casey Means.
Oh, I remember that.
It was so amazing.
Yeah, some of the talks that you guys gave were so impactful. I mean, thankfully, a lot of those videos have gone viral.
Yes.
I've had the majority of those people on my podcast, and it was so impactful. I actually remember seeing Callie Means on the Tucker Carlson show with his sister.
Yeah.
And for someone that is, is woke, whatever you want to call it, and aware of the biohacking community, nutrition in general, I was blown away because he laid out the sequence of corruption. And I think that those two particularly have a really interesting skill set and background, even though now they have a shared mission, one coming from a very allopathic, I think she was a head and neck surgeon from Stanford.
Yeah.
And then he came from highly educated, and he came from the political side of things where he was
literally
lobbyist.
He was working as a lobbyist for companies like Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating because he had a look under the hood that many people are not actually revealing to the general public, which was fascinating. I had him on my podcast a couple of years ago, and same thing. I was blown away because a lot of what he is saying, he's just validating what a lot of us have been trying to say for years. And he came out and he said, yeah, this is all true. I was literally in the boardrooms, a part of these conversations.
Yeah, it was part of my job to influence politicians for these certain outcomes. And I think he just woke up one day and was like, wait a second, this is all wrong. I mean, when he started talking about the intentionality of it, that's what really began to sway my opinion. It's one thing to be doing something and not know. It's another to know, intentionally continue, and intentionally and aggressively cover it up to the point where you're actually willing to ruin somebody else's life, besmirch somebody's reputation, harm children. That's when you realize the sinister intention of it. And one of the things he said, I'll never forget, was that his group had 5 lobbyists for every member of Congress.
That's nuts.
So I'm just thinking, man, if you're a member of Congress, and this is only one group, one lobbying group has 5 lobbyists assigned to you. And he was like, it was our role to try to take up all their calendar slots, contribute to their campaigns, support their events,
wine them,
dine them, and to try to just overwhelm them with meetings and appointments and essentially try to take up as much of their bandwidth as they possibly could. And that's when I realized, man, we have more of an intentionality behind this than I thought. Just like you said, I don't think it began with sinister intentions, right? You have famine, you need to feed the nation.
Yep.
And then it just grew into this big chemical agricultural industry, a lot of which is wholly unnecessary now.
Exactly.
And humanity is paying the price.
Exactly. Like, again, at the time, I think it was great. It was this modern technology. Oh my gosh, what do you mean? We don't have to can everything now. We can just add these additives and preservatives in there that will prolong the shelf life. This is what many people need to understand, is that the majority of the food on our shelves was not created with health in mind. It was created with profits in mind, because they want it to be shelf stable so that it can stay on the shelf for long periods of time.
Right.
I was doing this little personal experiment at my house, still kind of ongoing, and I've released 2 videos about this already, but I bought just a bunch of conventional loaves of bread from the grocery store in December. I got Sara Lee and some other
December.
Yeah.
It's what, April now? Almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's almost April. Those bags have been open. They've just been opened, sitting on my counter, and since December, and there is not a drop of mold on any single one of them. Nothing. They smell quote unquote fresh. Like, it's still squishy. It's not dry.
Really?
Yes. loaves.
Wow,
And I have
that's
like
the seed
5 different
oil, that's
loaves.
the preservatives, that's the additives, that's wow, the
Exactly.
folic acid,
Yep,
all of
exactly.
those things.
Yeah.
So you're hyper focused on glyphosate
Mhm.
because you know, they call it a forever chemical, and I'd love for you to define what that means. But why glyphosate in particular?
So glyphosate, well, first of all, the reason I'm most concerned about it is because it's become so ubiquitous.
Hmm.
So we're spraying it on all of our fields. The backstory of glyphosate is they were using a lot of these chemicals in World War II. Like
Hmm.
Nazis were using them in as nerve agents and gas chambers.
Hmm.
They weren't using glyphosate specifically, but they were using known insecticides and pesticides, and they have similar chemical components to glyphosate. And then same with the Vietnam War. Agent Orange was created by Monsanto.
Hmm.
So now, fast forward, these agrochemical companies need somewhere to use their chemicals and their fertilizers, and so they pivoted to spraying them on farmlands.
Hmm.
And what happened initially is they said, "Oh, they're totally fine. These are not harmful at all to health." So the farmers are spraying down their crops with everything, and the glyphosate was killing everything, including the plants that they were trying to grow. So what
Hmm.
happened was they genetically modified seeds, they genetically modified plants to grow to where they could just spray the fields with glyphosate and everything would get covered in glyphosate and the plant itself wouldn't die, but it would kill everything else off.
Hmm.
Well, here's the issue with that. And this is where I get super passionate about something called regenerative farming because the
Hmm.
soil, we talk a lot about soil health. So glyphosate also acts like an antibiotic, which means that it's not only killing off bad bacteria, but it's also killing off all the good bacteria.
Wow.
And we talked about how a lot of people are consuming glyphosate and they're getting it in their bodies. And then everyone's having all these, IBS and Crohn's and gut issues and leaky
Antibiotic
gut syndrome.
resistance.
Exactly. Well, it's no wonder because all of us are consuming an antibiotic almost on a daily basis and we don't
Hmm.
even know. And on top of that, it's not labeled. It doesn't need to be on the label. So people can be consuming it and they have no clue. Now, where my passion really comes in all this is that when we're spraying our soil with glyphosate, because it's an antibiotic, we're killing off the entire ecosystem of the soil that makes the plants healthy in the first place. I don't know if you've heard this before, but I've heard this quoted often. We are only as healthy as our soil is
No doubt.
because our plants are growing in our soil. And if our soil does not have the ecosystem, the bacteria, the bugs, there's this whole ecosystem that half of what we probably still don't even understand what's going on there. We're killing all of that. The soil is barely hanging on. And then we think that the plants that are going to grow out are going to come out with enough vitamins, minerals, and nutrients for us. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And when you leave nature to do what it is intended to do, what it's meant to do, which is a thing called regenerative farming, there's this
Oh, I love this.
there's this incredible process that happens called carbon sequestration, where carbon is actually pulled out of the atmosphere because a lot of people were super concerned for good
Hmm.
reason about there being too much carbon in the atmosphere. If we leave nature to do her thing, she pulls the carbon out of the atmosphere, and that is actually food for the soil.
Mm.
And if we're not spraying it with all these chemical interventions, we're letting the soil thrive with the bacteria and the bugs and everything that it's meant to be and how it's meant to be there. The carbon's in the soil and it's this really deep, rich, like beautiful black soil. That's going to be food for the plants.
Yeah.
And we see so many articles now saying, oh, our food is losing, it's devoid of vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. You talk about this all
I
the
did.
time.
Yeah. I talk about it all the time. You know, it's funny. I love the book that you read, We Are What We
You are what
Eat.
you eat. Yeah.
But I think we're also what we eat eats.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
And which is getting you closer to the soil. I mean, I totally agree. When you have, when we feed livestock, you know, if you've ever driven by a commercial feedlot, it's really kind of a sad
It's
place.
heartbreaking.
It's just acres and acres of dirt and mud,
Mhm.
no grass as far as the eye can see, feed troughs,
Yeah.
which are very often corn, soybean, millet, these other things. And there's a butcher in Naples that I'm friends with, and they stopped buying meat from a certain farm, and he said they were actually adding high fructose corn syrup to the feed.
Oh,
And the meat was so full of pus because
because they were sick.
the animals were dying of type 2 diabetes right before they were slaughtered. They were on their way to dying from type 2 diabetes. I mean, where in nature does a cow run into high fructose corn syrup? And he said it was
Oh my
actually
God.
causing their teeth to rot all the way up into the gums because they would lose their teeth, so they
Oh.
couldn't really chew.
And I love cows. That actually
You
breaks
do?
my heart. Yeah.
I
I
do
also
too. I love animals in general. I mean, but
Yes.
yeah.
Well, I saw something online too, and a farmer actually verified this to me. They're starting to feed candy to our livestock now too, just to fatten them up. They don't even think about the nutritional value anymore of like, oh, how can we feed them so that they're, healthy and they get enough nutrients? No, they're just like, how can we fatten them up as fast and quick as possible? So they're
Right.
feeding them candy bars. They'll just throw candy bars in their feed, and sometimes they don't even take the wrappers off, I heard.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. I mean, you see a
horrible.
lot of those, videos of especially pigs that are eating
Yes.
garbage, but a lot of it has plastic in it. I mean, they don't even take the plastic out of it. So, where does this go? So, glyphosate is an issue, and for the first time maybe in our adult lifetime, there is a potential opportunity to affect public policy because of people like yourself going and speak in front of Congress, and the whole Maha movement, which I think is just phenomenal. No
Yeah.
matter what side of the aisle you're on, you've got to be pro nutrition, pro healthy food, because we all deserve, especially our children, deserve
Yes.
clean food. So where does this go in a perfect world? Where does your mission, where can you have the greatest effect?
That's a great question. I mean, look, if I could just change one thing, it would just be, can we just get these additives out of our food and
Mhm.
focus on real food? I think a lot of it is, there's an education component there because there's a large portion of the population that's been eating so much foods out of packages that they, one, are scared to cook now, or they feel like they can't cook, or maybe it hasn't been passed down through
Mhm.
generations through them anymore. So I definitely think there's an educational component there. So how can we really start like and honestly what I would love to see is we start doing this in schools with kids,
Mhm.
have them when they're in kindergarten, have them start tending a garden and teach them the importance of growing your food, and then show them how that food is then ending up on their plates for lunch.
Yeah.
And then how can we have them have a cooking class? I think this should start
Yeah.
very, very early because there is a large education component there because now we're just telling, because I have a huge issue about this. I actually just talked about this on a podcast yesterday. We are telling people, oh, you don't have time to cook, or it's so expensive, don't even try. So I think so many people are not even trying anymore. They're not even
Yeah.
attempting it because they just think like, okay, well, that's one that's too expensive for me and it's not going to be accessible for me and it's super hard. We live in the most amazing time of information. You can literally open TikTok, open YouTube, and just type in any recipe you want to make, and you can
Right.
watch a video of it.
Right.
So you can very easily, and I think so many people are scared to cook, but it is so easy. It doesn't have to be complicated. Grill up a steak and
Right.
then bake some sweet potatoes and then add a little arugula on the side. Like done. It does not have to be so
Agreed.
hard. So from a policy standpoint, what we need to do is a couple things. I think first of all, we need to stop paying subsidies for foods that are driving our chronic disease.
Mm.
Corn and soy, like I said earlier, are largely making up of the majority of the food-like products
Is it
on our
corn, soy,
shelves.
wheat? Those are the big ones? Or
Yes.
corn, soy are the majority?
Yes. So over 90% of our corn is genetically modified and over 90% of our soy is genetically modified.
Mm.
And those are a lot of what we're paying subsidies for. And then wheat as well. And then wheat is just now starting to be genetically modified. And
Wow.
so that means that it can withstand glyphosate. So you hear all this talk online saying, oh, GMOs actually means less pesticides. No, the pesticides are quite literally in some of those seeds that are
Mm.
genetically modified. And if they're not, they're having to spray everything like crazy with glyphosate. So it actually means more pesticides, not less.
Yeah, because if something is genetically modified to be resistant to glyphosate, it's probably going to absorb and survive holding on to the glyphosate. I mean, we already know that it not only makes it into our food supply, it makes it into our blood. It made it into my blood.
Yeah.
And if it's getting in mine, it's getting in everybody's. I promise you that.
Exactly. Because we're eating organic and
Yeah.
we're going above and beyond. I mean, I filter my water, I filter my shower.
Mhm.
I'm eating all organic in my home. The only time I don't eat organic is when I'm eating out and I can't control it.
Like many of you, the hardest thing for me is to shut off my mind at night when I want to sleep. And it's funny because sometimes I'll wake up tired, already thinking of when I'll get back to bed again. But exactly the moment that I lay my head on the pillow, it feels like the machine of crazy what if thoughts is turned back on. Does this happen to you? Let me tell you my new secret to deal with this. You may have heard of Magnesium Breakthrough by Bioptimizers and how great it is for sleep and promoting calmness and relaxation. What I found out is that the brains behind Magnesium Breakthrough have taken it to the next level with a product specifically designed for sleep. It's called Sleep Breakthrough, and it's been a total game changer for me. Sleep Breakthrough combines the power of magnesium with other natural ingredients to help us fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and actually wake up feeling refreshed. Since I started taking Sleep Breakthrough, I've been waking up feeling rested, energized, and ready to tackle the day ahead. I highly recommend giving Sleep Breakthrough a try. Trust me. Visit Bioptimizers, that's bioptimizers.com/ultimate and order now. Oh, and in addition to the discount you'll get by using the promo code ULTIMATE, there are always amazing free gifts with your purchase. That's also why I love shopping at Bioptimizers. Go now to bioptimizers.com/ultimate to get your sleep breakthrough and find out this month's gift with your purchase. Now let's get back to the Ultimate Human podcast. You know, I've heard you talk a lot about too. I actually want to come back to regenerative farming, but I heard you say something that, organic eating is now no longer negotiable.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you might describe organic eating, organic food labeling, because I think too that there is, maybe it's not direct corruption, but there's a lot of misinformation, if you will, on organic food labeling. So for the average consumer walking into the grocery store, and it's like, okay, I'm going to sacrifice some other areas of my budget because I'm going to make sure that my family's eating the cleanest, organic food. Where do they start on that journey?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, the reason I'm such a huge supporter of organic food in general is because there's a lot of laws and regulations around what is allowed and what is allowed to be sprayed on organic food. So legally by law, if it's stamped organic, it means that it was not allowed to be sprayed by glyphosate.
Mm.
If it's meat or dairy, it wasn't allowed to be injected with growth hormones. They're not allowed to give them, pharmaceutical drugs. There's a lot of laws around it. Also, they can't eat genetically modified crops
Wow,
with organic. So if you
that's
buy
good.
organic meat, exactly, you know that they're not eating this pesticide-laden grains.
Right.
So that to me is the biggest concern right now and why
Mhm.
I feel like it's non-negotiable. But what is so insidious about all this is that organic is just what we should be eating. There should not be two different options. What I would love to
Yeah.
see is that we're just not using these pesticides anymore.
Right.
And organic is just the only option. It's just food, right? Because, 50 years ago when our grandparents were eating, they were eating organic, but they weren't labeling it organic. It just was food.
It's so true. I heard Max Luger say on a podcast one time, if your grocery store has a healthy food section,
Exactly.
what does that tell you about the rest of the
What
store?
is the rest of
I'm
it?
like, it was just so simple, but I loved it. I actually was in Medellin, Colombia a while back, and we were eating in this restaurant, and I ordered a steak, and I asked the guy if the steak was grass-fed. And he literally looked at me like I had two heads.
He's like, what?
And because, for him, he was like, what else do cows eat? Like,
Yeah.
why are you asking me that? Of course it's grass fed. And it just dawned on me. I was like, well, in the States, we have to ask this, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we have to check. I realize here, all they eat is grass because you guys got it right,
Yes.
which I think is part of the reason why you see our life expectancy has dropped. We talked
Yeah.
about this on your podcast, but, has dropped to 66th in the world, beneath some countries that don't even have clean water and sanitation. And I think in countries like that, your only accessible food
Is real.
real food. It's
Yeah.
whole food. And this is supported by Blue Zone Research. They were all eating whole food. They didn't eat dogmatic diets. There was, almost zero processed ingredients
Yeah.
in the diets of these centenarians. Plus they moved and they had a sense of community. But I want to work my way back to regenerative farming because there has to be an answer other than just stop poisoning the food. Because what the chemical industry is going to say is if we stop spraying for glyphosate, or if we stop spraying glyphosate on the crops, all the pests are going to eat it. This is an herbicide. The weeds are going to take over, and that's going to be worse for your food than what you're getting in this small amount of micro poisoning.
Yeah.
What we have as the GRASS guideline, right? That generally regarded as safe. And I think that a lot of these guidelines are based on single dose toxicity,
Mhm.
meaning, yeah, if you go out and eat an inorganic piece of fish or chicken or, a traditionally fed cow and some, non-organic vegetables, is that going to kill you in a single meal? No, but it's the cumulative dose toxicity, right, over time
Exactly.
that our cellular biology just can't handle anymore.
Yeah.
And our immune systems can't handle it anymore.
Well, we're seeing a really concerning trend right now. I would encourage people to Google this because you can actually look up photos. So, look, you can never outsmart nature. Nature
Mhm.
always finds a way. And what's happening with a lot of these weeds that were initially being killed off by glyphosate, you're seeing these crazy glyphosate resistant weeds popping up everywhere that the farmers don't really know how to handle because they're no longer responding to the glyphosate.
Right.
And so it's again like nature always finds a way. It's similar to like, like the antibiotic resistance that we see when you're taking too much antibiotics. And we're seeing it a lot because we're giving it prophylactically to our livestock. So there's a huge concern with that as well. And there's a lot of pushback
Hmm.
against the organic movement from the agrochemical companies because they say, well, how are the farmers going to survive? How are we going to feed the world? How are we going to create enough food for everyone? And what I always tell people is there's this amazing farming systems trial that's been going on for 40 years. And what it is, it's been an ongoing study that's still happening right now. They've been doing it for 40 years
Wow.
through the Rodale Institute. And what they do is they have conventional farming on one side and then they have organic farming on the other side. And
No.
it's incredible. And what they have found is that in this organic farming system, it produces the same, if not sometimes even more yield than what the conventional is yielding. And then on top of that, it's sustainable because what we're doing in our conventional model right now is we're getting to a point where we are desertifying the soil
Yes.
and we're depleting it of so much nutrients that at some point you literally cannot plant there anymore and you
Mm.
have to go somewhere else to plant. And they are theorizing, and if we continue down this path and we keep ignoring this, that we have about, depending on who you talk to, anywhere between like 52 to 54 harvests left where we will no longer have soil that's plantable for plants.
Wow.
So we need to do something because what we're doing right now, it's just a quick fix, right? It's not long-term sustainable. And our grandkids are not even gonna have soil left to plant in.
What is sustainable agriculture? What is regenerative farming? And can we do that on a mass scale and still allow farmers to be profitable and maybe clean up the food supply? I get a lot of my stuff here in Miami from this place called Southwest Ranches, which is right down the street, and they're hyper um, vigilant about where they source their meats, their line caught fish, their honey, their maple syrups, all of their raw dairies. I can tell when I'm home and I'm eating that type of food, and then when
Yeah.
I go on the road and my choices are limited, my wife can too, like instantly feel it. It's just like we were saying before, when you go to Italy and you have a bowl of pasta and a basket of bread and you feel amazing,
Yeah.
and you come back here and you have a bowl of pasta and a basket of bread and you
And
blow
you're
up
like,
like a tick. You blow
exactly.
up
Like,
like,
oh.
yeah, you blow up like a tick. But um, do you have a hope that maybe under this Maha movement that the subsidies coming from the taxpayer will go towards quality foods?
I really hope so. That
Mm,
is one of my number one dreams, like hopes that we get out of Maha. I know Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is incredibly passionate about
mm,
regenerative farming, and I know he knows about it. And also, too, we know that it can be done large scale. I mean, we
mm.
have these farmers like Will Harris and Joel Salatin that have these huge regenerative farms, and they all came from the traditional conventional path and they switched over to regenerative. And
Mm.
they also provide a lot of resources for farmers that want to switch over. It's also healthier for the farmers because they're not using all this glyphosate and all the other stuff that so many of these farmers, no one is really talking about this. So many of these farmers are now getting non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Oh, yeah.
They're getting crazy aggressive forms of cancer from using these chemicals for
Turbo
20,
cancers.
30.
Yeah.
Exactly. But, part of the issue is that we need an entire reform of our food system here in America because right now we have, I don't know the exact number, but we have a small amount of just really large industrialized farms. And then they're just shipping out everything across the country. And what people don't realize is that an apple that you get at the grocery store has probably been, it was probably 3 weeks from being picked because
Wow.
they picked it and then they sprayed it with something in the truck that makes it ripen while it's on its trip to you.
Hmm.
And then finally, by the time you get it at the grocery store, it was picked like 3 weeks ago and it was ripened in the back of a truck, not on a tree.
Right.
And we're doing this largely across all of our food systems. So what we need to do is we need to incentivize farmers to go back to regenerative farming. We need more local farms
Yeah.
where we can get local produce from our communities.
And do you think that there'll be a point where we start to subsidize regenerative farming and sustainable agriculture, and we actually get back to taking good care of the soil? Because I see it in our clinic system too. So many human beings are just nutrient deficient.
Yes.
They're vitamin, they're mineral, they're amino acid, they're nutrient deficient. And when you look at the importance of these nutrients in the human body, how our calcium and phosphorus form hydroxyapatite to create bones, and that process needs 12 minerals. And when we're actually creating neurotransmitters, which form the basis of our mood, that process needs raw materials, vitamins, which used to be prevalent in our food
Mhm.
supply, and they used to be prevalent in our fruits and our vegetables, and now it's just so um, depleted. I wonder if there's you know um, an era where we're not subsidizing non-foods, we're actually subsidizing
That would be
the
amazing.
the
Why
whole
can't we
food.
subsidize whole real foods and
Yeah.
encourage more local farmers to want to get back into farming? I think a lot of these smaller farmers that are super passionate about all this, they're all getting pushed out by these big
Hmm.
industrialized farms that are taking over everything. And then they're just ruining our food supply and they're spraying everything and they're conventionally farming. And yeah, and to your point, I mean, you talk about this all the time, the nutritional deficiencies. Americans are overfed and undernourished.
Yes.
They're eating
We're
so
actually
much more.
overfed because we're undernourished, which is really interesting,
Exactly, exactly.
right?
And we're not getting enough nutrients from our foods because we're really not eating a lot of real foods anymore. And then when we are, they're devoid of vitamins and minerals and nutrients that were there before. And this is another argument for organic. They do a lot of, there's been a lot of studies and testing done, and they find time and time again that conventional crops, you think that the organic food is lower and devoid of nutrients and minerals and vitamins. The conventionally grown has like nothing left.
Right.
So at least with organic, it's higher in the mineral content, and it's still a lot lower than generations before. But
Hmm.
at least in organic, it has higher amounts than the conventional does.
And I think too that when you look at cellular biology, I mean these deficiencies trace to very specific conditions and diseases, and it's not like all vaccines cause autism, all glyphosate causes cancer.
Yes.
It's this multifactorial thing where our food system has become so corrupt, and I wonder if we might even talk for a moment about the influence that the chemical industry has on our
Oh
government
yeah.
and public policy.
Some of that's happening right now.
Yeah. And I want you to bring it up so that you disappear and I can continue my podcast. Um,
My fiance
I
has
always tell
literally
my audience, I'm like, if I disappear, open an investigation because I'm really, really happy. I'm like, I love my family. I love my wife. I
yes, not
love what I
suicidal. I
do.
love my family. I'm about to get married. I'm very excited. No, I mean, really, honestly, my fiance recently was like, are you good? Are we good talking about some of this stuff
Are
publicly?
we
Like,
good?
are you going to
Yeah.
be okay? And I'm very spiritual, and I really believe that I came to earth with a purpose, and my purpose is
Mm,
to help people thrive and wake them up to, I think it's greater than even the food system, but I think right now currently my mission is to help people wake up to their own innate power and knowingness about themselves and knowing how to feed themselves and how to take care of themselves and how to thrive, because the human body wants to be healthy. We
mm,
just need to give it the right tools to. And healthy can mean, it's so much more than just diet, right? It's your mental state, it's your community, how much sleep you're getting. Like, it's more than just the food. But I really believe that I came here with a purpose, and I just can't shut up. So like, sorry, I'm not going to stop talking about it. And so I feel like I have a
Your
certain
poor husband.
protection. I know. He's like, Courtney,
Yeah.
you're going to get but okay, so glyphosate. So
Yeah.
this is where it does become insidious, because now that they know that this is happening. So
Hmm.
I mentioned earlier, Monsanto was bought out by Bayer in 2018, and then shortly after that, Bayer, but which was before Monsanto, started getting pulled into a ton of litigations with
Mm,
mostly farmers, but just Americans in general that were getting non-Hodgkin's lymphoma from glyphosate.
right.
To this day, they have spent over $2 billion paying back farmers and other Americans that have gotten non-Hodgkin's lymphoma from glyphosate.
Mm,
The IARC, which is the International Agency for Research on Cancer through the World Health Organization, says that it classifies glyphosate as a probable human carcinogen. Now, meaning that we probably basically know that it
yeah.
causes cancer.
Yeah.
So this is why it's so incredibly concerning. And now Bayer knows this, but they are currently working, and they're going state by state. It's actually on the governor's desk right now in Georgia. They're going state by state. They're trying to go through their legislators, through their senators, to get immunity from being sued if someone gets cancer. So essentially, if this passes in Georgia It would mean that if you or I were farming, or just in general, if we were using glyphosate in our lawn and we got cancer, and the research shows that glyphosate's connected to cancer,
Mm.
and we got the cancer and we're using the glyphosate, we would not legally be allowed to sue them. It's actually the same thing that the vaccine companies went for in
Wow.
1986, which is the immunity shield, where if you get harmed by a vaccine, you can't hold the company liable.
Right. That
So,
is mind-numbing to me.
I mean, it's insidious.
It's
Why can't we just
mind-numbing
stop
to me.
using the chemicals? But instead, they're pushing back even further, and they want to get this immunity. And if it passes through Georgia, there's a huge concern that then it's just gonna, pass like wildfire throughout all the other states.
Wow.
So we're currently trying to block it. In fact, I post about it all the time on my Instagram. I post numbers that you can call, emails you can call.
I'm going to do that too.
Yes.
Yeah, give me that information because I will stand with you on that. So if I bring this back to the consumer, I'm a mother or father, I'm listening to this podcast. I'm concerned. You've sort of woken me up to this. What do I do tomorrow? Right? I mean, where do I start in the grocery store, without really breaking my budget? What are some ways to avoid some of the most sinister things? Because we're not going to shift everybody's habits, all the way overnight. But I think a lot of people hearing this are like willing to make incremental change.
Yeah.
So where does that start with them around the kitchen?
Well, okay, I think first and foremost, I would be remiss without talking about this. You have to reframe and understand that there may be a little bit of budgeting and reframing of priorities that has to happen.
Mm.
Because unfortunately, we are living in a time right now. If you do not make time for your wellness, you will be forced to make time for your illness.
Yes.
It is just that dire at this point. And I'm
Mhm.
not trying to scare anyone, but I believe in telling people the truth.
Mhm.
And if you know this, then you're going to be way more inclined to actually want to take action. So some of that is, okay, instead of, eating out for every meal or postmating everything or going to Starbucks every single morning, how can you make that coffee at home? How can you stop getting food delivered every single night?
Right.
How can you have just dinner out one night a week and make it more of a special thing?
Yeah.
And start focusing on buying groceries and cooking at home. It doesn't have to be these fancy, 5-course meals. It can be something really simple to
Mhm.
make. I think also too, people think that fast food is cheap. It is no longer cheap. In fact, I did a series on my podcast called Organic for Everyone. It was so much fun.
Really?
Yes, my producer and I would go and we would buy really popular fast food items and see how much the cost of that was. Like we did Taco Bell Cheesy Gordita Crunch, for example.
Yeah.
And then we also bought all the ingredients to make that at home. Every single ingredient was organic. We were buying it from super accessible stores like Walmart, Ralph's, Kroger.
Really? Okay.
Every single ingredient was organic. And then we made a copycat of that at home. And every single time it was cheaper to buy all organic groceries and make it at home than it was to go through the drive-thru.
Wow, that's so amazing. I'm going on your Instagram and I'm gonna
Yes.
I'm gonna re-forward all of your videos and put them up on my Instagram. And if you want to make me a collaborator on them, I would love to
Yeah,
help you
I
get
would
the
love
message
that.
out because
Thank you.
I do this similar thing called lateral shifts where I'll take anything that people like to eat and I try to make them two promises. One, I won't change the flavor profile, and two, I won't add a dime to their budget. And I had a very similar experience.
That's amazing.
So people would go to their refrigerator and sometimes these are on lives, we got thousands of people on and they'll go to the refrigerator and they'll open the refrigerator and they'll say, what do you like to eat in there? I'm like, oh, I love this. I won't say the brand name, but this yogurt brand with fruit on the bottom and it's all the individual like peel off packs.
Yes.
Like, okay, well, let's spin that around. And you look at the back and it's like, ooh, 54 grams of sugar, high fructose corn syrup. There it is. Natural
Gums,
fruit flavor,
additives. Yep.
which means ain't got no fruit. And you say, well, which one of those do you like to eat? Oh, I like the blueberry. And you say, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to the grocery store. We're going to buy a quart of whole fat Greek yogurt. We're going to take a basket of organic blueberries and we're going to get a bag of monk fruit. And you're just going to scoop some of that whole fat Greek yogurt in there. You're going to throw in a fistful of organic blueberries and put a teaspoon and a half of monk fruit, mix it up. And you tell me if, how's that tasting? Like, oh, God, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And when you actually look at the buying it by the quart and the basket and the bag versus buying it in a lot of these convenience.
Exactly.
So a lot of times like the crap food is packaged in a convenient way. And so people are actually paying for the convenience
Exactly.
and getting the crappy food. And I think that's
big
a
one.
big narrative that needs to shift is the expense
Of convenience.
of convenience.
I
And
say this all the time.
yeah,
Convenience is killing us. It really is. And we think that it's so, I said this earlier, it has been so hammered into us. Oh, it's so expensive to eat healthy. It's so expensive. I'm by no means saying that I think that that some of this stuff is not overpriced. And I know if you really
right.
start getting into ins and outs of it, it can get really expensive. But if you are dire straits, really on a budget, forget the organic, okay? That is concerning and I focus on it. But like if you are dire straits and you were just trying to eat more whole real foods, just get ground beef, rice, beans, a big quart of yogurt. Normally eggs are well priced. I think they're going back down right
Yeah,
now,
they are
but
back down now.
I think
I
so,
heard.
right? Yeah.
I heard they're like back like 4 or 5 years ago prices.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah,
I
yeah.
need to, I've been traveling, so I haven't gone to
Saw
the
it
grocery
on the
store
news.
recently. But, focus on the basics like that. And like you said, get fruit and get yogurt and just focus on eating as many whole real foods as you can and dump all the convenience because it's expensive.
Over the last 20 years in human biology, one compound I've trusted again and again is NAD+. It's critical for energy, focus, and cellular repair, but your levels drop around age 30. I used to administer NAD via IVs in my clinics, but now I take Row Nutrition's liposomal NAD, the first oral formula that actually works. Their advanced delivery tech gets NAD straight into your bloodstream. I take 1 teaspoon daily, and the results are real. Clean energy, sharper focus, and better recovery. You can try it risk-free with the Ultimate 15 code at checkout for 15% off. Just put in Ultimate 15 at checkout. You'll receive 15% off, and your cells will thank you. Now let's get back to the Ultimate Human podcast. I see too that there's a lot of free apps out there right now.
Yes.
There's like Seed Oil Scout,
Mhm.
and I
Trash
get all.
Panda.
What is it called?
Trash Panda, where you can scan everything. So people can go and scan
Oh,
everything in the grocery
and it's
store.
called Trash Panda.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of a cool name.
I know it's such a cute name. I love it.
That's catchy. Trash
Yeah.
Panda, great job. And so you scan the QR code on any food label,
Exactly.
and it'll tell you.
And then it'll tell you, it rates it, and then they tell you all the ingredients that are red flag, why they're red flags, and then it'll give you alternative options.
Really?
Yeah, it's really
That
cool.
is amazing. Okay, so I'm going to link these in my show notes, like Seed Oil Scout. What is it?
Trash Panda.
Trash Panda.
It's so
Trash
cute.
Panda.
I know.
There's another one that will, and I'm gonna figure it out. It's just not coming to me right now. That will tell you where your local farmers markets are.
Yes.
And shockingly, when I look at the number of places where you can buy locally grown food, nearly every state in North Dakota, like colder climates, there's a lot of places that have farmers that are growing foods and make it available to the public. And there's apps that you can use to help you find that.
Yep.
I use one here called Southwest Ranches, and raw dairy, raw cheese, their bees, their honeys. I mean, and it's
amazing.
just amazing. And I think that we could have a shift. And I also believe that awareness is key, because through people like yourself, myself, and all of our peers, if it becomes politically not cool to be siding with chemicals, synthetics, pharmaceuticals, highly
Yes.
processed foods, which is poisoning our children, that's a giant win.
Mhm.
And if the consumer, if their buying habits shift, then there's no choice but for the market to
It
shift.
drives the consumer trends.
Yeah.
Actually, during our Senate speech, Jason Karp, who's the founder of Hugh Kitchen, he actually said this, and he knows what it's like to be in those boardrooms with those companies. And he said that a company like, for example, Kellogg's, General Mills, if they see just a 10% drop in their sales, they scramble. Just 10%. Do you know how little that is?
Billions of dollars, but
Exactly. But I mean, from our perspective of like, if we all of a sudden just decide like, we're not going to buy from their products anymore, and we're going to buy from a smaller local farm or, a smaller company that's actually doing right by us, that doesn't take that many people to see a huge shift like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, look at organic. Organic has absolutely exploded in the last 10 years, and it's all driven by consumer trends.
Yeah.
We drive that with our money. I think people don't understand how much power we actually really have.
Yeah. And I think that now there's an opportunity because of social media, which can be good or bad, but because of social media, to kind of circumvent that system too, to circumvent that media narrative. Because it was really interesting, just as a crazy exercise during the Super Bowl this year, we sat with my family and we were just taking note of all the commercials.
Yes. It was all junk food.
Oh my gosh, it's like the
Injections.
consumer doesn't even stand a chance. If
I
I
know.
like, I know the Ozempic jingle by heart now. Oh, oh, Ozempic.
Vic.
And it's like the choir's back there, like, because
We're
I
all
heard it
singing
so many
along.
singing
Yeah.
along. And, and
It's
then,
so funny.
the Doritos commercials are so cool. But, what I find really encouraging, we just banned red dye number 3. There are certain states like Texas. There's a state recently, I want to
West
say,
Virginia just
West
banned it.
Virginia, um,
Huge.
just banned it. And so this means now, if you're one of these major manufacturers or distributors and you just cut off an entire state,
Yeah.
um,
They're gonna be
maybe
forced to make that change for everyone else
we will
too.
start, and do you think that this is profit driven? Because they've already made the changes overseas. I think this is another thing that the public doesn't really,
Mhm.
Food Babe does a great job at highlighting this, um, raising awareness to the fact that it's not something that can't be done because it's something that they're already doing. It's
Exactly.
just they're not doing it here.
And these American companies are making these for other countries. That's what
Right.
drives me nuts about it.
That blew my mind.
I know.
That, when you compare the labels of, again, I won't use a brand name, but a box of certain cereal here and the same box, identical box of cereal made by the same
Yeah.
manufacturer in the UK or even in Canada in some cases, the dramatic shift in the ingredients. And I got to think it's just got to be pennies per product.
But you know what that is actually? So Jason Carpigan was talking about this at our Senate hearing, and he was emailing back and forth with one of these companies. And the issue is that they have realized that the brightly colored cereals and, brightly colored fruit snacks or whatever it is
Mm,
that they're adding those dyes into make them more appealing and addictive to children.
mm.
And so that's why they do it. So Trix actually famously a couple years ago, they announced we're taking out all the
Tricks are for
artificial
kids.
colors.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're like, we're gonna use natural dyes, to color them. Well, they're not as bright because they're colors made in nature. It's why when you see cereal, it's like fluorescent highlighter color. It's not
Yeah,
like colors that you
fluorescent highlighter.
it's
Yeah,
not
mauve and chartreuse. You're like, I don't see
like,
those in
I
nature.
do not see this in
Yeah.
nature. Yeah, it's like highlighter colors. They actually saw a dramatic drop in their sales
Mm,
because Trix was the only one that was doing it, and so they brought them back. So this is a
wow.
large part of the issue is that these companies are digging their heels in because they're like, "No, we're gonna lose money off of the profit of these cereals."
But I think also if there weren't alternatives,
Well, exactly.
then,
If everyone was forced to, then the kids will just have to acclimate, and honestly, it will be so much better for them. The reason why they've banned them in places like the UK and Sweden is because they have recognized that these dyes cause hyperactivity in children.
yeah,
Talk to anyone who's an educator and who's been in the space for the last 20 years. I can't tell you how many teachers DM me almost on a day-to-day basis. And they'll
really,
say, I've been working for, 20 years as an educator, and I have never seen so many behavioral issues ever in my life.
really, yeah. And you hear this in schools. I mean, and again, it's multifactorial, and I
Yes.
don't want to sound the alarm on any one thing causing everything, but at some point, these skyrocketing rates of autism, skyrocketing rates of childhood cancer, the skyrocketing rates of obesity, it's scary. The number of children now that have fatty liver disease, almost 15% of our teens and prepubescent teens have fatty liver disease. I mean, that used to be reserved for alcoholics.
Alcoholics. Oh,
Um,
that condition largely didn't exist 50 years ago. That
yeah,
one really gets me.
it gets me too. And autism, which again is multifactorial, but it's a neural inflammatory condition. And we know that certain things are causing these neural inflammatory cascades. And a lot of autism distance on the spectrum is related to the grade of inflammation that they have,
Yeah.
and the amount of this neural damage. And the exciting thing is that a lot of this is reversible. Um,
Yes.
and I think, people like myself that had a career in mortality coming together with people like yourself that have a career in nutrition and other people that have careers in politics and medicine, we're all starting to realize that, man, we really need to do something. But the solution is very promising.
Mhm.
Like it's really exciting. It's not a restriction of the freedom of choice,
Mm-mm.
because that is one way that this movement gets attacked. I get attacked. You get attacked.
Yeah.
Is that we're just going to strip free choice away from everybody, which is not what we're doing. We're not saying you can't have ice cream. We're not saying you can't do all of those things that are going to decimate your health. but there's no reason why we should consciously be allowing this stuff
Yeah.
into the food system. So, back to the average mom and dad, or baby biohacker that's just getting going. What would you say? Because I love that you posed this question to me on your podcast. What are 2 or 3 things that they could do tomorrow? Not big shifts in their budget that you think could dramatically change the trajectory of their health.
I would say first and foremost, do an audit of your pantry and just start paying attention and reading ingredient labels.
Mm-hmm.
If you can do that one shift and start slowly swapping out a lot of your normal everyday food products that you're buying for ones that are made with real ingredients,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be off to a great start. So I have a really, really simple hack for this.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in the grocery store and you're reading a label and you see all the ingredients in there, you never want to just look at the front. The front is a billboard for the package. They're just
Right.
trying to sell it.
Oh, and they'll also often have the health claims on there,
Exactly.
which is something else that Max Luger talked about that I thought was, it was also one of those just phenomenally obvious things that I never really thought about before. And he was like, you realize that most health foods don't make health food claims.
Exactly.
Like there's not a claim on the avocado, really healthy fatty
Heart
acids,
healthy.
maybe
Yes.
may lead to longevity and a healthy heart. But you go to the seed oils and it's like heart healthy, low in saturated fat, polyunsaturated. It's like they try to
Exactly.
8 vitamins and 4 nutrients, fortified, enriched. It's
a
amazing
billboard.
it's amazing how many non-health foods they have to make health claims. You're right on the front of the package. So spin it around, look at the ingredients.
Yep. And I would say the more health claims they make on the front is usually a really red flag.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you'll learn. Here's the thing. The first couple times you do this, you'll probably spend a couple of hours in the grocery store, sorry. But you get in a rhythm and then you kind of understand and then you know what foods you like. And you kind of start to understand which ones are just, you can already
once you've
tell
done
it's a
it
red
once,
flag.
you don't have to do it again.
Exactly.
Right.
So my rule is if you can read all those ingredients. If you could technically, if you wanted to make this product at home, I'm not saying you have to, but let's say that you were like, okay, if I wanted to make these crackers at home, could I buy every single one of those ingredients in the grocery store? I always use Simple Mills as an example. Simple Mills has rosemary extract. It's made with almonds, just all whole real foods.
Mhm.
You could technically buy every single one of those ingredients in the grocery store and put it in your cart and make those crackers at home if you wanted to.
Wow.
Whereas alternatively, if you turn around something like Cheez-Its, it has BHT in there, it has some preservatives and some other crap in there that you're reading that and you're going, I have no idea where I would find BHT in the grocery store. Where would I find that in the grocery store? It doesn't
Right.
exist.
Wow, that's a great point.
So that would be something that I would say, put that one back on the shelf, look around. There's a lot of different alternatives now. If you're looking for a cheese-like cracker, there's a couple of other brands now that are creating ones that are just made with real food ingredients.
Mhm.
If you start doing something like
Masa,
that,
some of these other ones.
you're already going to be off to a great start. Another one that I love to remind people, real food tastes amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
It is so good. Especially if you learn a couple things that you love to make, you can repeat those, follow some creators online that teach you how to make really simple whole real food ingredient recipes. Also, you don't have to give up your favorite foods. We literally had burgers for lunch.
Yeah.
I eat burgers a couple times a week.
That's so awesome. Yeah,
But-
we had organ blend meats and we had the ground beef with it and we had some shaved goat cheese on the top.
Oh, it was
It was delicious, right?
amazing.
Yeah,
it
it
was
was so good.
delicious. It was so good. And this is what I remind people all the time. You don't have to give up your favorite foods, but make sure that when you're eating those foods, they're made with whole real food ingredients. So if you can't find a restaurant nearby that's using 100% Italian flour or whatever it is in their pizza dough,
Mhm.
make pizza at home.
Yeah.
Make those burgers at home, or find a really good burger place that has grass-fed burgers and beef tallow fries if you can find them.
Mhm.
So that would be my
That's
second
a great
one.
spot.
Is
Okay.
you do not have to be restrictive. In fact, I have never had a healthier relationship with my food ever in my entire life. Like I've
Wow.
never had a healthier relationship with it because as long as it's real food, nothing is off the table for me.
Right.
I don't feel like I'm like, oh, I can't have that cookie or whatever. I'm like, is it made with real ingredients? Great. I'm gonna have the cookie. I love it.
Yeah.
That's my only restriction, is that I want it to be made with real food.
Right.
Whereas before, when I was eating like Slim Fast bars and stuff, I was literally trying to how many calories is in this? And, trying to track everything. And I don't
Mhm.
even think of that way anymore.
Yeah. Neither do I.
So I'd say that. And then I would say the last one is try to eat as many meals at home as you can.
Great.
Because when you eat out, this is when you're going to start seeing the additives and the seed oils and everything else. So try to eat as many meals at home as possible.
I love it. Courtney, you're amazing. You're definitely coming back on, I hope.
Thank you.
We have so many friends in common, and it's an absolute honor, and a blessing to be on this journey with you, and giving the support to this Maha movement. I have a VIP community, so I let them know who's coming on the podcast.
Awesome.
And so they're waiting for you, and they've got some questions for you. So we're going to jump into my VIP here in a minute. And if you're interested in becoming a VIP, just go over to theultimatehuman.com, and that's theultimatehuman.com/VIP. And you can sign up to be a member of my VIP community. I'll even send you a free box of H2 tabs. If you sign up to be a VIP, this is where we do live coaching, we do challenges, we have private podcasts. This is where I really am pouring the best of what I'm doing in my research and in my travels around the world. So, Courtney, I end every podcast by asking every guest the same question, and that is, what does it mean to you to be an ultimate human?
I think, oh man, I have to think about this for a second. How do I want to answer this? I think to be an ultimate human is to live with your soul's purpose, and also to live in integrity and always strive for the truth, and to be the best you can for yourself and for your others, or for everyone in your life and everyone that you love. One of the main reasons that I got into healthy eating in the first place is because I knew what it felt like to feel really sick. I think a lot of people largely walk through life not even knowing how sick they actually are and how sick they actually feel, because they have no comparison. And I went from feeling really good in my home, then going out of the home and eating like crap all the time, feeling really sick, and then coming back and realizing, oh my gosh, like this is what so many Americans go through every day, and they feel this way and they don't even realize. And so I think learning how to nourish my body, take care of my body, and just to feel better. And then as a result, I'm more clear-headed. I'm more in touch with my innate knowing what's best for me, and I can have better discernment. And yeah, it helps me live a better, more full life. And also I want to live a full life. I want to have fun. Too. I want to have fun. I want to have fun with my friends. I want to have energy. I want to do all the things I want to do. I have so many things that I want to accomplish. And I think being healthy and taking care of my body allows me to do all of that and show up for others.
That's so amazing. So for my audience that's not familiar with you, where can they find you online, and where can they find out more about Realfoodology?
Yeah. So I'm at Realfoodology across the board on Instagram. I have a podcast called Realfoodology. I'm starting to get more active on X. And yeah. Oh, also, I have a free grocery guide. If you go to realfoodology.com and you just plug in your email, you'll get a free grocery guide sent to you. And it goes over everything we talked about today. And you can just take it with you to the grocery store. If you're like, what did Courtney say on the podcast about X, Y, and Z? Then you can reference it in that.
Amazing. Courtney Swan, thank you so much for coming on The Ultimate Human. And guys, until next time, that's just science.